The airport smelled like burnt coffee and wet coats. Daniel Mercer stood near baggage claim with one duffel bag hanging from his shoulder and exhaustion buried deep in his bones. Outside the glass walls, snow drifted slowly across the parking lot lights, turning Chicago into a frozen blur of white and silver. Christmas music played faintly from the overhead speakers, cheerful and hollow at the same time. He checked his phone again. No new messages from Ava. Not even a missed call. After 11 months working pipeline security contracts in Alaska, Daniel had imagined this moment differently. He pictured Ava running into his arms at arrivals. He pictured her crying, laughing, maybe both. He pictured driving home together while she held his hand over the center console the way she always used to. Instead, she texted him 3 hours earlier. "Sorry, babe, emergency meeting at the office. I'll be home late. Keys are under the planter." Emergency meeting. On December 23rd. At nearly 9 at night. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment before slipping the phone into his jacket pocket. His chest felt strangely tight, but he told himself not to overthink it. Ava was a corporate attorney now, senior associate. Long hours came with the territory. Still, something felt off. Outside, icy wind slapped against his face as he loaded his bag into the truck he'd left in long-term parking nearly a year ago. The engine coughed twice before starting. He laughed quietly to himself. "Missed you too." The drive home took almost 40 minutes through sleet-covered streets glowing with Christmas lights. Families hurried through sidewalks carrying wrapped gifts. Restaurants overflowed with couples in winter coats. Every window looked warm. Every window except his. Their townhouse sat dark at the end of the block. No Christmas lights. No tree visible through the curtains. Daniel frowned as he parked. Ava loved Christmas. She was the kind of woman who started decorating in November and forced him to wear ugly sweaters while baking cookies badly off Pinterest recipes. Last year, she'd made him spend 3 straight hours hanging lights exactly evenly across the porch roof. Now the house looked abandoned. He stepped out slowly, boots crunching through snow. The planter beside the front door held the spare key exactly where she said it would. Inside, silence swallowed him immediately. No candles burning. No television. No music. The air didn't even smell like Ava anymore. Usually the house carried traces of vanilla lotion and cinnamon candles and expensive perfume. Tonight it smelled cold. Empty. Daniel shut the door carefully behind him and flicked on the kitchen light. The first thing he noticed was the wine glasses. 2 of them. One sitting in the sink. The other still on the counter, beside an open bottle of red wine. His stomach tightened slightly. Maybe she'd had a coworker over. Maybe. Then he noticed the man's coat hanging beside the stairs. Not his. Long black wool, expensive. Daniel stood completely still. A strange numbness crawled up the back of his neck. "Ava," he called. No answer. He walked deeper into the house. The dining table was covered in paperwork, legal folders, open files, pens scattered everywhere, 2 coffee mugs. 1 lipstick stain. 1 without. The silence upstairs suddenly sounded louder than anything. Then he heard it. A muffled laugh. A man's laugh. Coming from the bedroom. Daniel froze. For 1 second, his entire body stopped working. His heartbeat turned heavy and slow, like something massive slamming against his ribs underwater. Another laugh. Ava this time. Soft. Intimate. Not work. Not emergency meetings. Daniel moved upstairs without realizing he was moving at all. Each step creaked beneath his boots. His jaw clenched harder with every floorboard. At the top of the stairs, light spilled from beneath the bedroom door. Then a man's voice drifted through. "She's not gonna back out now, right?" Ava answered immediately. "No, Daniel trusts me." The words hit harder than a punch. Daniel stared at the door. His hand slowly curled into a fist. The man laughed quietly again. Poor bastard. Something inside Daniel snapped cold instead of hot. Not rage. Worse. Clarity. He pushed the bedroom door open. Ava gasped. The man standing near the dresser turned sharply. For half a second, nobody moved. Daniel's eyes scanned the room automatically. Ava wore silk pajamas he'd bought her last Christmas. Barefoot. Wide-eyed. Beside her stood Richard Bennett. Her boss. 48 years old, senior partner at her law firm. Married. Still holding a whiskey glass. And sitting neatly on the bed between them were divorce papers, already signed by Ava. Daniel looked at the documents first, then at her, then at Richard. Nobody spoke. Snow tapped softly against the bedroom windows. Finally, Ava whispered, "Daniel." Richard recovered first. He set the whiskey down calmly and straightened his tie like an arrogant politician preparing for a press conference. "Well," Richard said smoothly, "you're home early." Daniel kept staring at the papers. His name was typed neatly across the top. Petitioner, Ava Mercer. Respondent, Daniel Mercer. The room suddenly felt freezing cold. Ava stepped forward carefully. "Baby, listen to me." "Don't." His voice came out low and deadly quiet. She stopped instantly. Daniel picked up the document slowly. His deployment savings. Their house. Joint accounts. Everything already divided. Prepared. Organized. Planned. He flipped another page. Infidelity clause removed. Spousal support waived. Fast-tracked filing. This wasn't impulsive. This had been building for months. Maybe longer. Richard folded his arms calmly. "You're just in time to sign." Daniel lifted his eyes toward him. For the first time, Richard's confidence flickered slightly. Daniel was a large man, 6'4", former Army engineer turned private security contractor. His face carried the hard stillness of someone trained to stay calm in dangerous situations. And right now, he looked terrifyingly calm. Ava swallowed hard. "Daniel, please, we didn't want you finding out like this." Daniel looked at her for several seconds before speaking. "We." Tears immediately filled her eyes. Richard stepped in smoothly again. "Let us be adults about this." Daniel almost laughed. "Adults?" He glanced around the room slowly. His side of the closet half empty. Picture frames missing from the shelves. Her wedding ring absent from her finger. This had been happening while he was freezing on remote job sites 12 hours a day trying to build them a future. Every overtime shift. Every missed holiday. Every lonely night. For this, Ava finally spoke again, voice trembling. "It just happened." "No," Daniel said quietly. "Things that just happen don't come with legal paperwork." Silence. Richard sighed impatiently. "Look, Daniel, dragging this out helps nobody." Daniel turned toward him fully now. Richard tried to maintain composure, but instinctively took half a step backward anyway. "You were in my house," Daniel said. Richard cleared his throat. "Technically, it's her house too." Daniel kept staring at him. Then, surprisingly, he nodded once. "You're right." Ava looked confused by the response. Daniel placed the papers back onto the bed carefully. No yelling. No threats. That somehow made the atmosphere even worse. "Ava," he said softly. She looked relieved for a split second. "Yes." "How long?" Her face collapsed immediately. "Daniel." "How long?" Richard answered instead. 8 months. Ava shot him a horrified look. "Richard." "What?" Richard snapped. He asked. Daniel absorbed the number silently. 8 months. Almost the entire deployment. A memory flashed suddenly. Ava crying at the airport before he left. Promising she'd wait. Promising they were forever. Promising she loved him. 8 months. Daniel rubbed one hand slowly across his jaw. "You could have divorced me before cheating." Ava started crying harder. "I tried to tell you things weren't working. You texted me hearts every night. That doesn't mean. You told me you loved me yesterday." Her voice cracked apart. "I do love you." Richard rolled his eyes slightly. Daniel noticed. That tiny movement changed something. Because suddenly, he understood the dynamic completely. Ava wasn't the mastermind here. Richard was. Older, wealthier, experienced. He'd probably convinced her Daniel was temporary, replaceable, beneath her now. Daniel looked at Ava again. She couldn't even meet his eyes. That hurt more than the affair itself. The woman who once looked at him like he hung the moon now looked guilty, ashamed, and trapped all at once. Richard reached for the papers again. Look, if you sign tonight, we can keep this clean and fast. Nobody has to suffer. Daniel slowly turned toward him. Then he smiled. Not warmly. Not kindly. A cold smile. You think I'm signing tonight? Richard's expression tightened slightly. Ava whispered, Daniel, please don't make this ugly. Daniel looked around the room one final time. Then he grabbed his duffel bag from the hallway floor. You already made it ugly. And he walked out. Ava chased him downstairs immediately. Daniel, wait. He ignored her and kept moving toward the front door. Please just talk to me. He stopped finally beside the kitchen island. The wine glasses still sat there under bright overhead lights. A perfect little scene. She looked smaller suddenly, standing across from him. Fragile. Scared. Daniel realized she genuinely expected him to explode. Maybe scream. Punch walls. Threaten Richard. Instead, his calm terrified her more. Ava, he said quietly, did you ever love me? Tears rolled down her face instantly. Yes. The answer came too fast. Automatic. Reflexive. Daniel studied her carefully. Then nodded once. I believe you. Her face crumpled in confusion. But not enough. The words destroyed her. She broke down crying harder, reaching toward him instinctively. Daniel. He stepped back. That hurt her too. You don't get to touch me anymore. Upstairs, Richard appeared at the railing. Everything okay down there? Daniel looked up slowly. Richard tried to appear confident again, but tension lined his face now. Daniel memorized him carefully. The expensive watch. Perfect haircut. Arrogant posture. Men like Richard always believed money insulated them from consequences. Daniel had met plenty overseas. Most eventually learned otherwise. He opened the front door. Snow blew inside instantly. Ava's voice cracked behind him. Where are you going? Daniel paused without turning around. To find out who my wife really is. Then he left. The cold outside hit like knives. But it felt cleaner than breathing inside that house. Daniel drove without destination for almost an hour through frozen city streets, while memories tore through his mind in violent flashes. Their wedding. Her laughter. The first apartment they couldn't afford. Late-night tacos. Fighting over paint colors. Promises. 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 Every memory felt contaminated now. Around midnight, he parked outside an all-night diner near the river. Inside, old country music played softly, while exhausted waitresses refilled coffee cups for truckers and insomniacs. Daniel sat alone in a booth near the window. His phone buzzed nonstop. Ava calling. Again. 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 Then texts. Please answer. Please come home. I'm sorry. Please don't disappear. Daniel flipped the phone face down. A waitress approached cautiously. You okay, honey? Daniel looked up. She was maybe 60, kind eyes, tired smile. He almost said yes automatically. Instead, he surprised himself. No. She nodded like she understood more than he said. Coffee. Please. She poured him a cup silently. After she walked away, Daniel stared out at the snow. Then another message appeared on his screen. Unknown number. He opened it. Richard Bennett. I know this is difficult, but dragging things through court won't help you. Ava has already moved on emotionally. Best thing you can do is preserve your dignity. Daniel read the text twice. Then smiled faintly. There it was. The arrogance. the assumption that Daniel was already beat. He typed back only 4 words. "You should have stayed professional." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then vanished. No response. Interesting. Daniel leaned back slowly. For the first time all night, anger began replacing shock. Not explosive anger. Focused anger. The dangerous kind. Because Richard didn't know something important. Daniel Mercer wasn't just some blue-collar husband who disappeared for work. Before private security contracts, Daniel specialized in corporate infrastructure investigations for federal defense subcontractors. Meaning he knew exactly how powerful men hid things. And more importantly, how they got caught. He took a long drink of coffee. Then finally opened social media for the first time in months. Richard Bennett's profile picture showed him smiling beside his wife and 2 daughters at some charity gala. Family man. Community leader. Senior partner. Daniel stared at the image quietly. Then he began digging. By 2 in the morning, patterns already emerged. Richard traveled often without explanation. Expense reports online from public legal filings looked strange. Several former employees from the law firm had abruptly disappeared over recent years. And one anonymous Reddit post from nearly a year ago mentioned inappropriate relationships inside Bennett Legal Group. Interesting. Very interesting. Daniel's phone rang again. This time it was his younger sister, Mia. He answered silently. "Danny," she asked immediately. "Jesus Christ, Ava called me crying. What happened?" Daniel stared at falling snow outside the diner window. "She's leaving me." Silence. Then Mia said carefully, "Where are you?" "Diner on Wells." "I'm coming. You don't have to." "I know." She hung up. 20 minutes later, Mia burst through the diner doors wearing pajama pants under a winter coat and carrying pure older sister rage despite being 5 years younger. She slid into the booth across from him immediately. "I swear to God I'll kill her." Daniel actually laughed softly for the first time that night. "There she is." Mia's expression softened when she saw his face. "Oh, Danny." He looked exhausted beyond words. Not crying. Not angry. Just hollowed out. Mia reached across the table and grabbed his hand tightly. What did she do? Daniel told her everything. The house. Richard. The papers. The affair. By the end, Mia looked ready to commit actual homicide. "That smug rich piece of garbage," she hissed. "Her boss, seriously." Daniel nodded once. "She's manipulated too," he admitted quietly. Mia blinked. "You're defending her." "No." He stared into his coffee. "But I know predators when I see them." Mia studied him carefully now. "You're planning something." Daniel looked up slowly. "No." That answer scared her more. Because Daniel only got this calm when he was absolutely certain about something. "What are you gonna do?" He glanced toward the window again. "First," he said softly, "I'm gonna learn the truth." Back at the townhouse, Ava sat curled on the kitchen floor long after Daniel left. Richard paced nearby irritably. "You should have gotten him to sign before telling him." Ava looked up in disbelief. "Seriously?" "What?" "He's my husband." Richard sighed heavily, not for long. The words landed differently now. "Crueler. Colder." Ava suddenly realized something terrifying. Richard had never once asked if she was okay tonight. Not once. Only about the papers. The timing. The logistics. She wiped tears from her face shakily. "You shouldn't have texted him." Richard stopped pacing. "Excuse me." The dignity message. His expression hardened slightly. "How did you know?" "Because that's exactly the kind of thing you'd say." Richard adjusted his cufflinks defensively. "I was trying to keep things civil." "No," Ava whispered. "You were provoking him." Richard scoffed. "Please, the guy's a contractor from Alaska, not Liam Neeson." But Ava remembered Daniel's eyes tonight. That terrifying calm. And for the first time since starting the affair. She felt afraid. Not because Daniel might hurt them, but because she suddenly realized she may have completely misunderstood the man she married. And maybe Richard had too. By Christmas Eve morning, Chicago looked buried alive beneath snow. The city moved slower under gray skies and icy wind, but Daniel Mercer had been awake for hours already. He sat inside Mia's apartment wearing the same black thermal shirt from yesterday, laptop open on the kitchen table while coffee turned cold beside him. Outside the windows, traffic crawled through white streets. Inside, silence hung heavy except for keyboard clicks. Mia emerged from the hallway, wrapped in a blanket. "You haven't slept." Daniel didn't look up. "A little." "That's a lie." "Yes." She sighed and opened the fridge. "Please tell me you're not planning murder." "No." "You said that too calmly." Daniel finally leaned back from the laptop. Dark circles shadowed his eyes now, but something sharper had returned beneath the exhaustion. "Focus." Mia set orange juice down beside him and looked at the screen. "What exactly are you doing?" "Research." "On Richard Bennett." Mia pulled up a chair slowly. "How much do you already know?" Daniel rotated the screen toward her. "Corporate filings. Archived news articles. Property records. Expense reports. Photos." Richard Bennett's entire professional life spread across 12 tabs. Mia blinked. "Jesus. He's sloppy. Or you're terrifying." Daniel ignored that. "Look here," he said quietly, pointing toward an expense report. 3 years ago, the firm quietly settled a harassment complaint against Richard. No names listed, but the settlement was approved directly through his office. Mia frowned. "Could be unrelated." "Maybe." He clicked another tab. "A former paralegal. Suddenly resigned. Non-disclosure agreement attached to departure." Then another. And another. Mia slowly sat back. "Oh. Yeah." The room fell silent again. Mia watched her brother carefully. Daniel looked different this morning. Not broken anymore. Controlled. That almost worried her more. "You still love her, don't you?" she asked softly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Yes." The honesty hurt. Mia reached over and squeezed his shoulder gently. "Then don't destroy yourself trying to destroy him." Daniel stared at the screen for several long seconds. "I'm not after revenge." "Bullshit." He finally looked at her. "No," he said quietly, "I'm after the truth." Meanwhile, across town, Ava Mercer sat alone in her parked car outside her parents' house, gripping the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. She hadn't slept either. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel standing in the bedroom doorway. Not yelling. Not raging. Just looking at her like someone had reached into his chest and ripped something out. Her mother knocked lightly on the passenger window. Ava quickly wiped her face before unlocking the door. "Oh, honey," her mother whispered immediately after seeing her. "What happened?" Ava collapsed into tears all over again. Inside the warm suburban house, Christmas decorations glowed softly from every room. Her father watched football quietly in the living room while her mother made tea in the kitchen. Ava sat at the table, wrapped in a blanket, feeling 10 years old instead of 32. "Start from the beginning," her mother said carefully. And Ava did. Mostly. Not all of it. Not the loneliness. Not the insecurity. Not the way Richard had slowly inserted himself into every emotional crack in her marriage over the past year. Daniel worked constantly. Always traveling. Always exhausted. Always promising this contract would finally secure their future. At first, Ava admired his dedication. Then she resented it. Then she got lonely. Richard noticed immediately. He started small. Coffee during late nights. Compliments. Understanding. Listening. He remembered details Daniel forgot, because Daniel was thousands of miles away half the time. One emotional affair became physical before she fully realized how deep she was already drowning. And now here she was, watching her marriage collapse on Christmas Eve. Her mother looked horrified by the end. Ava, I know. No, I don't think you do. Ava's eyes filled again. Her father muted the television quietly and finally turned around from the living room. Did Daniel threaten you? The question stunned her. What, no? He hit anybody? God, no. Her father frowned thoughtfully. Then why are you scared? Ava opened her mouth. Closed it. Because she didn't actually know. Daniel had never once been violent toward her. Never controlling. Never cruel. Even during arguments. Especially during arguments. That somehow made this worse. She whispered, he looked different. Her father nodded slowly. Betrayed men usually do. At 11 that morning, Daniel parked outside Bennett Legal Group downtown. The towering glass building reflected white skies above crowded holiday streets. Most offices appeared empty due to Christmas Eve, but several upper floors still glowed with activity. Daniel remained inside his truck for a while, watching employees come and go. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered silently. Mr. Mercer. Female voice. Nervous? Yes. My name is Olivia Chen. I used to work at Bennett Legal. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. How did you get this number? I asked around after hearing what happened. Interesting. And what exactly did you hear? That Richard Bennett slept with your wife. Daniel stayed quiet. Olivia inhaled shakily on the other end. He's done this before. There it was. Daniel leaned back slowly. Tell me. 40 minutes later, he sat inside a small coffee shop across from a woman in her late 20s whose hands visibly shook around her latte cup. Olivia Chen looked exhausted. Haunted. Daniel recognized that look too. Richard targets ambitious women, she said quietly, especially married ones. Daniel listened without interruption. He starts mentoring them, makes them feel special, important, then eventually, she swallowed hard, things become personal. How many? At least 4 I know personally. Daniel's face remained unreadable. Did anyone report him? Olivia laughed bitterly. To HR, Richard basically owns the firm. What about his wife? She knows enough not to ask questions. Daniel absorbed that quietly. Olivia looked up carefully. Your wife isn't the first woman he's convinced to leave her husband. Something painful flickered across Daniel's face before disappearing again. How do you know about Ava? Because he talks. Daniel frowned slightly. He bragged. Olivia hesitated. Not exactly, more like, she searched for the right word, collection. A cold silence settled between them. Daniel suddenly understood something ugly. For Richard, this wasn't love. It was conquest. Ego. Power. Olivia slid a small flash drive across the table. I shouldn't be giving you this. Daniel looked down at it. What is it? Internal emails, expense records, settlement discussions. Why help me? Her expression darkened. Because nobody helped me. Daniel stared at her for several long seconds. Then nodded once. Thank you. She gave a sad smile. Just promise me something. What? If you expose him, don't let your wife become collateral damage. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because he wasn't sure anymore whether Ava was victim, accomplice, or both. Maybe all 3. Back at the townhouse, Richard Bennett stood in Daniel's kitchen drinking expensive scotch while acting like he already owned the place. That increasingly irritated Ava. You should leave, she said flatly. Richard glanced over. Why? Because my husband walked in on us 12 hours ago. Ex-husband. Ava flinched slightly. Richard noticed. His tone softened instantly, practiced and smooth. Ava, listen to me. He approached carefully. We knew this would be messy. Did we? The thought hit her suddenly. Had she actually known anything? Because now that everything sat exposed in daylight instead of hidden behind adrenaline and secrecy, cracks appeared everywhere. Richard poured another drink casually. He'll calm down eventually. You don't know Daniel. Richard smirked lightly. I know men. No, Ava whispered. You know manipulation. The room chilled instantly. Richard's expression hardened just slightly before smoothing out again. You're emotional right now. That sentence triggered something ugly in her stomach. Because suddenly, she remembered hearing him say that exact phrase to junior female associates before dismissing their concerns. Emotional. Difficult. Sensitive. She stared at him differently now. Really differently. Did you ever intend to tell your wife? She asked suddenly. Richard paused mid-sip. That's complicated. No, it's not. He set the glass down carefully. My divorce would have been expensive. Ava blinked slowly. You told me your marriage was basically over. It is. That's not what I asked. Richard sighed impatiently now. Ava, don't start moralizing after everything. The words slapped harder than shouting. After everything. Like they were equally guilty. Maybe they were. But somehow hearing him frame it that way made her skin crawl. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. Her heartbeat jumped violently. Richard noticed immediately. Don't answer. That alone made her answer. Ave. Daniel's voice sounded calm. Too calm. Daniel. I need you to tell me something honestly. She closed her eyes. Okay. Did he pressure you? The question stunned her completely. What? Richard, did he pressure you into leaving me? Silence. Because the truthful answer wasn't simple anymore. No. But also maybe yes. Not directly. Not obviously. Just slowly. Strategically. Emotionally. Like water wearing down stone. Ave. Richard watched her sharply from across the room. She swallowed hard. No, she whispered finally. I made my own choices. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. That hurt worse somehow. Daniel, where are you? Working. On what? His voice dropped colder now. Whether your boss destroyed my marriage or simply took advantage of cracks already there. Richard mouthed, hang up. Ava ignored him. Daniel, please don't do anything reckless. Did he tell you to say that? Her silence answered enough. Daniel laughed once under his breath. Not amused. Disappointed. Then he hung up. Richard immediately stepped forward. What exactly did he mean by that? Ava stared at him. For the first time since the affair began. She genuinely didn't know whose side she was on anymore. By evening, Daniel had enough information to ruin Richard Bennett publicly. The flash drive alone contained devastating material. Questionable payouts. Personal relationships hidden through firm accounts. Evidence of misconduct. Enough for lawsuits. Disbarment. Maybe worse. Mia watched him from the couch while Christmas movies played muted on television. What now? Daniel leaned back in his chair slowly. Snow fell heavily outside again. Somewhere downtown, families gathered for Christmas dinners. Children opened presents early. Couples kissed beneath lights. And his entire life sat shattered across a kitchen table. I could bury him, Daniel admitted quietly. Mia nodded. Would it help? He didn't answer. Because honestly, he didn't know. Part of him wanted Richard destroyed. Publicly humiliated. Stripped of everything. Another part wanted Ava to realize what she'd traded away before it was too late. And beneath all of that, the deepest wound remained horrifyingly simple. Daniel still wanted his wife. Even after everything. Especially after everything. That realization disgusted him. His phone buzzed again. This time another unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Mercer. Older female voice. Controlled. Elegant. Yes. This is Catherine Bennett. Richard's wife. Daniel sat up slowly. I think, Catherine said calmly, we should meet. An hour later, Daniel entered a quiet hotel lounge downtown, glowing with gold Christmas decorations and soft piano music. Catherine Bennett sat near the fireplace, wearing a dark green coat and pearl earrings, looking every inch the polished politician's wife. But her eyes looked tired. Very tired. She gestured toward the chair across from her. "Thank you for coming." Daniel sat carefully. "You knew." Catherine gave a humorless smile. "About your wife specifically, recently, about Richard generally," she exhaled softly. "For years." Daniel studied her silently. "You stay anyway." "I stayed for my daughters." That's usually the answer. "And you," she asked gently, "would you have stayed?" Daniel looked toward the fire. "Yes." The honesty surprised even him. Catherine nodded sadly like she expected that. "Richard chooses people carefully," she said. "He studies emotional vulnerabilities." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He made her believe I abandoned her." "No," Catherine corrected softly. "He amplified fears she already had." That landed hard because it felt true. Painfully true. Catherine reached into her purse and removed a folder. "Richard thinks he's untouchable." Daniel looked down at it. "What is this?" "Insurance." Inside were photographs. Messages. Financial records. Years of hidden affairs and misconduct carefully documented. Daniel looked up sharply. "Why keep this?" Catherine's expression turned cold for the first time. "Because eventually predators make mistakes." And now? Now he targeted someone whose husband knows how investigations work. A long silence passed. Finally Daniel asked quietly, "Why help me?" Catherine stared into the fireplace. "Because unlike most men Richard humiliates," her eyes lifted toward Daniel carefully, "you actually loved your wife." The words hollowed him out all over again. He looked away. Catherine leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Mercer, Richard believes you're a simple man." Daniel almost smiled. "He's not the first. He also believes your wife will eventually choose status over guilt." That one hurt too. Because Daniel wasn't entirely sure Richard was wrong. Catherine slid the folder fully toward him. "If you expose him properly, he's finished." Daniel stared at the evidence. Enough to destroy lives. Careers. Families. Everything. "You sound ready for war," he said quietly. Catherine smiled sadly. "No," she stood slowly. "I'm just finally tired of losing quietly." After she left, Daniel remained seated alone beside the fire. Christmas music drifted softly through the lounge. "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." He laughed bitterly under his breath. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was Ava. He almost ignored it. Almost. Finally he answered. Neither spoke immediately. Then Ava whispered, "I miss you." Daniel closed his eyes. That nearly broke him. "Ava, I know I don't deserve anything from you," she said shakily, "but please just tell me honestly. What? Is there any part of you that still loves me?" Daniel stared into the flames for a very long time. Then answered truthfully. "Unfortunately, yes." On the other end of the line, Ava quietly started crying. And for the first time since the affair began. So did Daniel. Christmas Day arrived beneath heavy gray skies and silent snowfall. Chicago looked beautiful from a distance. Up close, Daniel Mercer felt like he was standing inside the ruins of his own life. He sat alone in Mia's apartment before sunrise, staring at the folder Catherine Bennett had given him. The evidence inside could destroy Richard completely. Lawsuits, affairs, financial misconduct, manipulation patterns stretching back nearly a decade. Enough to bury him. Mia walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "You're still awake." Daniel nodded slightly. "You gonna do it?" He looked down at the folder. "I don't know." That answer surprised him. 24 hours earlier revenge felt obvious, necessary even. Now things felt heavier. More complicated. Because somewhere beneath the betrayal and rage and humiliation, there was grief. Real grief. Not just for his marriage. for the version of Ava he believed existed. Mia sat beside him quietly. "You know what sucks most about heartbreak?" she asked softly. Daniel glanced at her. "You don't stop loving someone immediately just because they hurt you." He looked away. "Yeah." Outside, church bells rang faintly through snowy streets. Christmas morning. Families opening presents. Kids laughing. Meanwhile, Daniel sat deciding whether to detonate multiple lives with the contents of a manila folder. His phone buzzed. "Ave?" Again. He stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hi." Her voice sounded fragile. "Hi." Silence. Then she whispered, "Can I see you?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Every instinct screamed no. But another voice, the one that still remembered her asleep against his chest on cold winter nights, answered first. "Where?" An hour later, they sat across from each other in a nearly empty park beside Lake Michigan. Snow drifted softly around frozen benches and bare trees. The skyline disappeared behind white haze while icy wind swept off the water. Ava looked awful. No makeup. Red eyes. Oversized coat wrapped tightly around her trembling frame. Daniel looked exhausted too. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Ava whispered, "You came." "You asked." Her eyes filled immediately. "God." He still sounded like her husband. That nearly shattered her all over again. Daniel kept his hands buried in his coat pockets. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said quietly. "It's freezing." The concern in his voice hurt worse than anger. "I deserved you screaming at me," she admitted shakily. "I know." A painful silence settled again. Ava finally looked up. "Are you going to ruin him?" Direct. Honest. Daniel appreciated that at least. "I could. But will you?" He studied her carefully. "Do you want me to?" That question stunned her. Because she didn't know anymore. 48 hours ago, she would have defended Richard automatically. Now every memory involving him felt contaminated somehow. Calculated. She looked down at her gloves. "I think," her voice cracked, "I think I made the biggest mistake of my life." Daniel inhaled slowly through his nose. Those words should have satisfied him. Instead, they just made him sad. "Ava," he said carefully, "did you love him?" She answered immediately. "No." Too fast to be fake. Daniel believed her. That somehow made this even uglier. "Then why?" Tears slid down her face instantly. "Because I was lonely." The honesty hit hard. Daniel looked toward the frozen lake. "You could have told me." "I tried." "No," he said softly. "You hinted there's a difference." She wiped at her eyes. "You were always gone." "I was working." "I know." "For us." "I know." The pain in her voice sounded genuine because it was. They sat there holding opposite sides of the same tragedy. Daniel had spent years trying to provide stability. Ava had spent years feeling abandoned emotionally. Neither problem erased the betrayal. But neither problem was entirely imaginary either. Finally, Daniel asked the question he'd avoided most. "When did you stop loving me?" Ava stared at him in horror. "I never stopped." Daniel laughed quietly. "Broken. You cheated on me for 8 months." "I know." "You planned a divorce behind my back." "I know." "You let another man stand in our bedroom and tell me to preserve my dignity." Ava covered her mouth as sobs escaped her chest. Daniel's voice remained calm. "Too calm. And somehow you still think this is love." She cried harder. "I don't know what to call it anymore." Neither did he. Snow continued falling around them in thick, silent waves. Finally, Daniel reached into his coat and removed Catherine's folder. Ava frowned slightly. "What's that?" "Everything." He handed it to her. She opened the folder slowly, and her face drained of color. Photos. Emails. Settlement records. Women. So many women. Richard with employees. Richard with clients. Richard lying repeatedly. Richard mocking emotional attachments in private messages. One email made Ava physically recoil. She read it twice before whispering, "Oh my God." Daniel watched her carefully. "What?" Her lips trembled violently. She swallowed hard. "He bet one of the partners he could get me to leave you before spring." The words hung frozen in the air. Daniel felt something inside him finally die. Not explode. Not shatter. Just quietly die. Ava looked nauseous now. No. She kept flipping pages, desperately, like the truth might somehow change. It only got worse. Messages describing her as emotionally dependent. Predictable. Easy to isolate. Daniel looked away toward the lake again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Not the defensive sorry from before. Not guilty panic. Real devastation. "I'm so sorry." Daniel nodded faintly. "I know." That made her cry even harder. Because somehow his kindness remained intact beneath all this damage. And she suddenly understood exactly what she had destroyed. Not perfection. Not fantasy. Something rarer. Someone genuinely loyal. Someone who would have stayed. Someone who did stay emotionally, even after she betrayed him. The realization crushed her. "I was gonna tell him no after Christmas," she whispered desperately. "I swear." Daniel didn't respond. Because honestly, it didn't matter anymore. Ava looked up with raw panic in her eyes. "Please believe that." "I do." That shocked her. "You do?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I think you finally started seeing him clearly once secrecy disappeared." Her shoulders shook violently. "I ruined everything." "Yes," Daniel said softly. The truth landed without cruelty. Which somehow hurt worse. By afternoon, Richard Bennett sat inside his penthouse office, growing increasingly irritated. Ava wasn't answering calls. Neither was Catherine. And Daniel Mercer had gone completely silent. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Bennett." "Yes." "Internal Affairs Division. We need to schedule a meeting regarding several allegations tied to Bennett Legal Group." Richard's stomach dropped. Then another call came immediately after. Then another. Then another. By evening, the first article appeared online. "Senior partner under investigation for workplace misconduct." No names yet, but enough details to start the bleeding. Richard called Catherine repeatedly. No answer. Then Ava. Voicemail. Then finally Daniel. To his surprise, Daniel answered. "What did you do?" Richard snapped immediately. Daniel's voice sounded calm. "I told the truth. You think this helps your wife." "My wife," Daniel said quietly. Interesting choice of words. Richard's breathing sharpened. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Daniel almost smiled. "No," he said softly, "you didn't." And he hung up. 3 days later, Richard Bennett's world collapsed publicly. More women came forward. Former employees. Former clients. Former assistants. The firm suspended him pending investigation. His wife filed for divorce. Board members distanced themselves overnight. Predators often looked powerful until people stopped being afraid. Then suddenly, they looked exactly what they were. Small. Cowardly. Pathetic. And through all of it, Daniel never once spoke publicly. Never gave interviews. Never gloated. That silence became its own kind of statement. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from social media completely. She moved temporarily into a small apartment near the north side and took leave from the law firm while investigations spread. People whispered. Coworkers judged. Friends vanished. Consequences arrived slowly, then all at once. One snowy evening in January, Daniel finally returned to the townhouse for the first time since Christmas. The house felt unfamiliar now. Quieter. Sad. Half-empty boxes lined the hallway where Ava had begun packing things before everything exploded. Daniel walked room to room slowly. Memories everywhere. The kitchen where they danced while cooking. The couch where they binge-watched terrible reality shows. The bedroom upstairs where he once believed he was safest in the world. Now it all felt haunted. He stood staring out the living room window when he heard the front door unlock behind him. Ava froze immediately after stepping inside. Neither of them had expected the other tonight. Snow dusted her coat and hair. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Then Ava whispered, "I can leave." Daniel shook his head slightly. "It's your house too." The words nearly made her cry again. She removed her coat quietly. "You look tired," he said. She laughed painfully. "That obvious?" "Yes." Silence again. Then unexpectedly she asked, "Have you eaten?" Daniel blinked. "No. I can make something." The offer sounded so heartbreakingly normal that both of them nearly collapsed under it. A married couple standing in the wreckage of their life discussing dinner. Daniel finally nodded once. "Okay." They cooked together awkwardly in near silence. Pasta. Garlic bread. Simple. Familiar. At one point, their hands accidentally brushed reaching for the same pan. Both instantly pulled away. That hurt too. Everything hurt now. Later they sat across from each other at the dining table eating quietly while snow fell outside. Eventually Ava set down her fork. "I resigned today." Daniel looked up. "From the firm?" She nodded. "They offered to keep me if I publicly distanced myself from Richard." Her voice turned hollow. "But honestly, I don't even recognize myself anymore." Daniel watched her carefully. She looked stripped raw now. No arrogance. No defensiveness. Just consequences. "What happens next?" she whispered. Daniel leaned back slowly. "I don't know." That was the truth. Because despite everything, he still loved her. And she clearly still loved him too. But love suddenly felt insufficient. Broken trust sat between them like shattered glass. Ava looked down at her hands. "I'd spend the rest of my life making this up to you if I could." Daniel's chest tightened painfully. "That's the problem." She looked up. "You shouldn't have to." Tears filled her eyes again. "You deserved better." He almost laughed. "So did you." That stunned her completely. Daniel rubbed one tired hand across his face. "I was gone all the time, Ava. You were providing for us. I was hiding inside work." Silence. Because that was true too. Daniel had buried himself in contracts and overtime and responsibility, because somewhere deep down he believed usefulness guaranteed love. And Ava had slowly drowned in loneliness instead of demanding connection honestly. Neither excuse erased betrayal. But pain rarely came from only one direction. Ava finally whispered, "Do you hate me?" Daniel thought about it carefully. "No." "Why not?" He looked at her for a very long time. "Because unfortunately I understand you." That broke her completely. She covered her face, crying silently, while Daniel stared down at his untouched food. The saddest part. If she'd screamed or manipulated or blamed him, moving on would have been easier. But watching someone genuinely realize the magnitude of their own destruction, that was brutal in a different way. Weeks passed. Winter deepened across Chicago. Daniel moved temporarily into a furnished rental downtown, while lawyers finalized paperwork neither of them truly wanted anymore. Some days they barely spoke. Other days they talked for hours. Not about reconciliation. About honesty. For the first time in years, actual honesty. Therapy started separately. Then together. Pain surfaced everywhere. Loneliness. Fear. Pride. Emotional neglect. Insecurity. The affair remained unforgivable. But their marriage, strangely, stopped feeling fake. Broken. Absolutely. Damaged beyond recognition. Probably. But real. One evening in late February, Daniel met Ava outside a quiet coffee shop after therapy. She looked healthier now. Still sad, but clearer somehow. They walked silently through cold city streets together until Ava finally stopped beneath glowing traffic lights. "I need to ask you something." Daniel looked over. "Okay." Her breath trembled in the winter air. "If we never get back together," she swallowed hard, "will this always be the ending you remember?" Daniel stared at her, then slowly shook his head. "No." She looked confused. "The ending I'll remember," he said quietly, "is whether we became honest before it was over." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "And did we?" Daniel thought about it. The lies. The affair. The destruction. Then the truth afterward. Ugly but finally real. He nodded once. "Yeah," he whispered, "eventually." Ava cried softly beneath the city lights, while Daniel pulled her gently into his arms for the first time since Christmas. Not forgiveness. Not reunion. Just two broken people holding each other honestly at last. And for now, that was enough.